Welcome back to the channel. This video is titled Grizzly Lathe, What Could Go Wrong? So you guys are probably expecting that I did something to my lathe. Actually I didn't. Everything's in good shape. But over the years, since I've had the lathe, I have made a few mistakes that came close to damaging it or myself. So what I'd like to do in this video is share some of those things with you guys. So let's get going and I'll show you some of those. I have another video on the channel that details the chuck on this lathe and the D14 cam lock and how to put it on and take it off. But in this video, safety wise, make sure that when you're using a chuck key, you never leave it in. There's a huge possibility that you can turn it on and really hurt yourself. So I avoid it. Some of the new lathes I saw in Grizzly, they have a chuck key with a spring on it or some kind of mechanism that prevents you from you leaving it in. So definitely just don't ever leave it in the chuck. So the next thing, always wear safety glasses because you're working with chips and this thing's flinging them out. Unless you have some kind of guard, they sell those too. What happened to me when I first got the lathe, probably within a week or two I was excited working on it. And obviously you're throwing chips. And I had a shirt on that had a collar that was somewhat open. And one of the chips for sure flew out and went right down my shirt. And it got exciting. So just, wear the proper clothes. Avoid wearing long sleeves because you could get them caught in the chuck or any moving parts. So one of the first things that went wrong when I got the lathe, I got pretty skilled at turning everything. I had no problems. And I did a part where it involved boring, threading, turning, everything, and at the end I had to cut it off. And what I used at the time was this cutter. And I'd made several cuts before with no problems, and what happened in this particular case is I had it in there, everything was going great, plenty of lubricant, everything, and I'm feeding it in, and all of a sudden it just grabbed, ripped the part out, and it just ruined the whole part. So not a big fan of these anymore. I don't really use it. I ended up buying a different style. And I'm going to do some more videos on tooling in that, but what I bought is one of these with the insert. And since then, I've never had an issue. But if you're using these cutoff tools, be careful. I am still, after that happened, still scared. That first time that I ever had anything launch or get removed from the chuck. So be careful with cutoff tools if you're using them. So the next thing that went wrong is I had a project where I had a long piece of stock here, just like this one. And at the time I didn't have the saw and I was just too lazy to use a hacksaw. So I had the great idea that I'll put it in the chuck and, because there's a hole in the chuck, and I'll show you that. And that I'd cut it off using the cutoff tool. So here's what it looked like. I had some stock sticking out here that I wanted to cut to length. And then on the, through the spindle, I stuck the rod out the other end. And you can see what happens. It's not supported back here. And actually, if I fling this, you can see it bounces. So actually, I wasn't turning that fast. I don't know what RPM I had. But all of a sudden, this started whipping violently. And if I didn't stop it, it just, I don't know. So be very careful. If you're doing this kind of thing, they make devices, or you can make one. It's called a spider, or I think it's called a cat's head, some people refer to it, where you can thread it back here and support the stock. But if you leave it, and especially if it's even longer than this, it could be very dangerous, could damage the lathe, and you could possibly get hurt. One of the other close calls I've had is, a lot of times you don't think about your final cut and where your jaws are. So what I've done now, I always, when I'm doing close work and everything, I look at the chuck where it is and then I spin it by hand, make sure on my final cut I'm not going to crash into the jaws. A lot of times you're just looking at the cutter surface here, but you don't look at like the tool holder here and this jaw when you're getting close. I've come close, but it's a good practice to just spin the chuck by hand and see if everything's going to clear when you're getting to your final cut or length. One of the other things that I did, and I think some other people out there have done it too, there's a gentleman, I saw the video where he actually had to rebuild his lathe. So what happens here when you're feeding, sometimes this lever is confusing on the Grizzly Lathe. So I didn't pay attention, and I had it, if you could see here, the lathe will not stop. There's nothing that prevents it from going and just destroying itself. So I didn't pay attention where I was. I was already close to the end of the travel, and I engaged it the wrong way. And I'm looking at the workpiece here, and by the time I realized that I got lucky, it had run all the way to the end here, and I quickly stopped it. But if you don't, it will continue, and you will do some damage to the lathe. Another thing to be careful of here, I've got this tailstock with a large drill in it. And a couple things happened to me here. If you don't tighten the jaws tight enough, and you really got to get them tight to hold the stock. So what I was doing, I was drilling away, and I had my fancy digital readout, and the readout's showing, you know, a depth, and over here I'm not really seeing it. What it turned out is the piece starts slipping in the jaws. And it's like one of those things when you're parked to a car that next to a car that moves, it looks like you're moving. So it's kind of an illusion, and I didn't see it at first. The other ugly thing that happened was as I was drilling the large hole, everything was going great again. Plenty of lubricant. Chips were coming out nice, clean, nothing strange. And all of a sudden, the drill grabbed, broke the drill off, you know, everything went out of whack. So what I've done since then, and you guys can comment, is I usually start with a smaller drill as a pilot drill for these larger ones, and I've had better success. So be careful there. Again, close call, but nothing happened besides I ruined a drill in my part. All right, so that was a quick video of things that have gone wrong on my lathe. Love to hear from you guys. What things have gone wrong with when you've been working on a lathe. I'm sure there's a lot of things that can happen that can do damage to the lathe or to yourself. So just be very careful when you guys are working on your lathes. I will have some upcoming videos that I'm working on. I'm going to do a series of, up till now I haven't really done any making with you guys. So I'm working on a project, still working on the design part of it. Probably be a multi-part video. And I'll take you guys along with me throughout the process. So we'll use the bandsaw, the lathe, the mill saw, other saws, everything. So, you know, stay tuned to the channel, and that should be coming up soon. So again, thanks for watching, and see you soon.